At 6 years old, a girl asked her mother whether she was an alien. Not adopted. She had considered adopted and ruled it out. She wanted to know whether she was a different species from the other children in her class, because she had been watching them carefully for a year and could find nothing in common, and that was the only explanation left that fit the evidence. Her mother laughed and said, "No, of course not. Don't be silly." That girl is in her 40s now and was assessed last year. I want to start there because of what that question was not. It was not shyness. It was not a phase or a bad week or a child being sensitive. It was a serious hypothesis, arrived at by a small person who had gathered data and reached the most reasonable conclusion available to her. And here is the thing that should trouble you, and it is a fact rather than an opinion. The diagnostic criteria for autism describe it from the outside: observable behavior. That is what a clinician is trained to look for, and it is what the manual asks them to find, which works reasonably well on a 6-year-old because a 6-year-old is mostly acting on impulse. It works considerably worse on a 45-year-old who has been compensating for 39 years. The manual itself knows this, which is the part almost nobody mentions. Written into the DSM-5 criteria is an acknowledgement that the traits must be present from early childhood, but that they may not become fully apparent until life's demands exceed what a person can carry, and that they may be masked in later life by learned strategies. Read that again. Masked by learned strategies. It is in the criteria. The document used to identify autism openly states that autism can be hidden by the very skills a person developed in order to survive not being identified. So we have a genuine problem. If you are an adult sitting there wondering whether you are autistic, the checklists you can find in 10 seconds are describing the outside of a person, and the outside of you is the part you have spent your whole life rebuilding. Which raises the question this video exists to answer. If the visible evidence cannot be trusted, how does anybody actually tell? There is an answer. It is more reliable than any online quiz, and it is not a list of traits, and I am not going to give it to you yet, because it will not mean anything until you have walked through what comes first. Stay with me. We cannot start at the end. What we can do is go to the place the checklists do not reach: the inside. I am going to describe 3 experiences. They are not diagnostic criteria, and I am not a clinician. They are 3 things that come up again and again in the accounts of autistic adults, and they are almost entirely invisible from the outside, which is precisely why they are worth your time. The first is feeling fundamentally different, not a bit of an outsider, not shy. Something more structural than that. The sense that other people were issued something you were not. The way I have heard it put most often is the anthropologist. You are at the edge of the playground or the office kitchen watching, and you are not sulking and you are not necessarily unhappy. You are studying. What are they doing? Why did that land? How did everybody know to laugh then? And there are 2 versions of this, which matters, because people rule themselves out on the wrong one. In the first, you have no particular urge to join in. Other children were interesting the way ducks on a pond are interesting, worth watching, not something you feel any compulsion to get in the water with. Not loneliness. It genuinely did not register that you were one of them. In the second, you want in very much and cannot work out the mechanism. Everybody else formed the group without discussion, and every time you approach, something scatters. Both of those are the same experience seen from different angles, and only one of them looks like the stereotype. Which is why a person with friends, a marriage, and a career will read a description of autism written around the first version and conclude it is not them, when they have been living the second one since they were 4. The second experience is not being believed. This one gets less attention than it deserves, and I think it does more damage than the rest of it put together. Here is how it runs. You say something true about your own experience. The lights in here hurt. I can hear that. That smell is making me ill. I cannot read this page no matter how many times I go over it. And the answer comes back. No, you can't. It's not that bright. Everyone finds that a bit much. You have a degree. Don't be ridiculous. Now watch what that does over 20 years. It is not one dismissal, it is thousands, and the effect compounds. You stop reporting. Not because you stopped experiencing any of it, but because reporting reliably produces the same result. And after enough repetitions, a reasonable person stops running an experiment that always fails. And underneath that, something worse. If everybody tells you the room is fine and you can hear the strip light screaming, then one of two things is true. Either everyone is wrong or you are unreliable. And you will conclude that you are unreliable every time because the vote is not close. That is the quiet thing that so many late identified adults carry. Not a list of difficulties, but decades of not trusting their own account of their own life. And I want to be careful here because I do not think most of the people doing the dismissing were being cruel. They were reporting their own experience honestly. The room genuinely was fine for them. Nobody in that exchange was lying. Two people were describing the same room accurately and getting different rooms, and neither of them had any way of knowing that was possible. There is a version of this that gets called gaslighting, and I would use that word carefully because gaslighting implies somebody is doing it deliberately. Most of the time, nobody is. That does not make the damage any smaller. It just means there is no villain to point at, only a pattern, running for decades that nobody involved could see. The third experience is social confusion. Notice I did not say a lack of social skills because plenty of autistic adults have excellent social skills. They built them. That is exactly the trouble. What I mean is doing consciously and effortfully and in real time what most people around you do without noticing they are doing it. The example I keep coming back to is walking between classrooms with a group at school. How close do you stand? Front, middle, or back? Can you talk while walking, or does that come out wrong? There is no gap to walk in. Do you make one or drop behind? And if you drop behind, are you now not with them? Most children do not spend the corridor solving that. Some children solve nothing else, and it does not stop at school. It becomes the work lunch, the leaving drinks, the school gate. When do I speak? Was that too long? Is this the moment to go? Am I standing too close to this person? And then it goes further, because if you cannot do it naturally, you prepare. You work out in advance what you will say. You keep a script. Somebody says hello and out comes, "I'm good, thanks." The wrong line, because the question had not been asked yet, but the machinery had already started. There is a real cost hidden in that, and it is not obvious. The preparation is done in the quiet. The actual event is loud, bright, fast, and full of people. And in that environment, the preparation is very hard to reach. So you arrive with a plan you cannot use, improvise instead, and then spend the evening reviewing the improvisation. None of that is visible. From outside, you are a person who had a normal conversation. That is the whole difficulty in one sentence. The more effectively you solve it, the less anybody can see there was anything to solve, including, eventually, you. Now, I said there was an answer, and we are here. So let me give it to you properly. The answer is not a trait. It is recognition. Here it is precisely. If you read or watch the honest inner account of a specific autistic person, not the diagnostic summary, the actual first-person description of what it is like inside their day, and your reaction is not, "That sounds a bit like me," but something closer to alarm, the feeling of a private thing being read out loud by a stranger, then you have your reason to take this seriously. Not mild agreement. Recognition of the sort that makes you put the phone down. And I want to give you a reason to trust that rather than asking you to take it as a nice sentiment, because this channel does not run on nice sentiments. In 2012, Damian Milton, an autistic academic, proposed the double empathy problem, that the breakdown in understanding between autistic and non-autistic people is a two-way mismatch rather than a one-way failure. Then, in 2020, Catherine Crompton and colleagues at Edinburgh tested it. 72 adults in chains of 8 passing a story down the line, one person to the next. Some chains all autistic, some all non-autistic, some mixed. The all-autistic chains passed the story along just as accurately as the all non-autistic chains. It was the mixed chains where the detail fell away fastest, and the mixed chains where the people involved rated the rapport lowest. Information moves cleanly between autistic people. That is a measured finding, not a feeling, which is why recognition is a better instrument than a checklist. A checklist asks whether your behavior resembles a description written from outside by people watching. Recognition asks whether another person's inside matches yours. And the research says that when both people are autistic, that transfer is high fidelity. So go back through the 3 experiences. Feeling fundamentally different, not being believed, social confusion. Each one is invisible from outside, and each one is unmistakable from inside, which is exactly why the outside-in method keeps missing adults and the inside-out method keeps finding them. One caution, and it is important. Recognition is not a diagnosis. It is a reason to go and ask the question properly. I am not a clinician, and neither is a video. So, what do you actually do? Find the accounts, not the lists. Written diagnosis stories, interviews, first-person descriptions. And look for people near your own age, sex, culture, and circumstances, because that is where recognition is sharpest. A middle-aged woman may find nothing in the account of an 8-year-old boy and everything in the account of a woman diagnosed at 50. If you want a formal assessment, and many people do, for support, for accommodations, or simply to stop arguing with themselves, find a clinician who assesses autistic adults and ask them directly whether they do before you book, because a great many have only ever assessed children. Write your history down first, going back to childhood, and take it in. School reports, what relatives remember. You will mask in that room too. Let the paper speak when you cannot. Take somebody with you if talking under pressure is hard. That is a normal thing to do, and nobody will think less of you for it. And on self-identification, since it always comes up, many autistic adults reach the conclusion long before any appointment, and for some, formal assessment is not accessible or not wanted. That is a real position held by a great many people in the community, and I am not going to dismiss it. What I will say is that a formal diagnosis is the thing that opens certain doors, workplace adjustments, some services, and that is a practical matter, not a matter of who counts. Last thing, and this is the part I would be failing you if I left out. If something in this video has landed somewhere deep, be ready for more to follow. People who start pulling on this thread often find a great deal attached to it. Years of things reinterpreted at once, and it can be overwhelming in a way that catches them off guard. That is common, and it is not a sign that anything has gone wrong. So do not do it entirely alone. Find people, other autistic adults if you can, and the ones whose accounts actually resonated with you. And if it becomes heavier than you can carry, that is worth taking to a professional. You do not need a diagnosis to deserve support, and you do not need one to go and ask for it. Your question is a worthy question. You are allowed to want a real answer to it. Now tell me in the comments, was there a specific moment when this first occurred to you? A book, a video, something somebody said? I would like to know what the trigger was, because somebody reading it is going to recognize their own. If this was useful, subscribe and stay with me. There is a great deal more to talk about. Thank you for sitting with me a while. Take care of yourself. I will see you next time.